For your thermocline, just as reference, you have water above the thermocline, which is warmer temperature, and then immediately below the thermocline is colder water. And by definition, every 6 inches, the water temperature will change 1 degree. That is the identifying way that we say is a thermocline, the definitive thermocline. It often happens much faster than that. But typically 49 degrees finds itself at the bottom of the thermocline, right at the bottom, okay? So now we're starting to see the temperature drop slowly after that, okay? So now I have the ceiling of where the cold water meets the warm. And it's sometimes called the slip, okay? The current slips on the thermocline. The warm water above in the dense cold water is stationed, right? So the fish sometimes, salmon, you know, we see them as fast, you know, swimmers and wanting to move about and attack bait and that sort of thing. But sometimes they just want to be lazy and they go down into that cold water and they just kind of hang there in the cold water, sometimes to slowly digest their food, and then come up into the warmer water and feed. They'll do these undulations in depth very frequently throughout the day. Some studies have shown that. So, you know, really what we want to do is kind of find where that bottom of the thermocline is, and let's say it's down 60 feet. Thermocline 49 degrees is down 60 feet. Excellent. So I'm trolling, and then all of a sudden I start to see my see my fish hawk. It's either going up or down. Oh, thermocline is either climbing shallower or going deeper. What's going on there? Okay, so now you're starting to get this 3D model in your head again, but now it's about temperature and where these thermal plumes might be happening out in the lake. So now you get this additional spatial reference of where fish are. So I can see where forward facing and that together is really going to come to be.
You got to find them before you can see them. So if you can't position yourself in the right position or overfish, doesn't matter what sonar you have, you ain't going to see them, right? So
that's going to be.
Yeah, it's a game changer, I think, with the technology that's coming for the trollers, especially. You know, we're gonna start to see a huge learning curve. I think you're obviously ahead with the learning curve on the forward facing with trolling, but you know, it's still putting together that pattern any particular day. You have to be aware. Being aware is the most important. And reading this information and understanding it, processing it, and then applying your practical fishing techniques to catching fish. You know, the fish could be negative, neutral, or positive. They're hopping on your baits, right? You don't know it until you try it, and using this information as cues certainly can help. I remember, you know, when I started in the chartering, I was at a 50 point. I worked on Real Pleasure Charters, and we were dock mates with Catch One Sportfishing. Now, Catch One Sportfishing was using strike vision. Now, some of you may have remembered strike vision, and back then it wasn't flat screen TVs. He had a tube TV on his dashboard.
Big tunnel.
Okay, and watching these salmon come in on the camera. Real time.
Charlie White fishing machine.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we thought that was really, really cool. But, you know, we were using our 2D sonar and that's about it. But now you got that, you know, and much more now with forward facing
Well, that's
sonar.
what we're at. Right?
Yeah.
Pretty much the next step after that is putting a camera down there and you know what I mean, having a camera with range and
I use a camera on pretty much. I'll maybe make, I don't know, a dozen casts in a practice day of 4 days of practicing. I'll use a camera and my units and my forward facing sonar for all my fish. And the only time I make a cast is if I can't really judge something on forward-facing sonar. It's kind of maybe I'm like, sheephead, might be sheephead, could be smallmouth, or you know what I mean? So I might try to hook one. But yeah, like a camera has been, it's funny, like ice fishing guys have been using cameras for,
Yeah, that's right.
and it's just all of a sudden like, I know tournament bass guys are starting to use them for smallmouth a lot. Like I'll graph fish and then I'll be like, get over top of them again on my trolling motor, hit spot lock on my trolling motor because it's down, and then I'll just drop a camera down the side of my boat, and then the camera is integrated into my actual screens now, and I can just turn to the camera screen on my graph and I see the fish. I'm like, yep, those are good fish. Camera goes up, waypoint, and you could put like BF, big fish, right? and you drive away and you hope you find them again. But yeah, it is the technology and processing it and integrating it. Like there's this old adage, I remember, like there's been a lot of young tournament guys in the area like get really good really fast. And I know a lot of older tournament guys were really hard on us and like, you know, you guys are spot mooching, you must be, I've been out here for 10 years and I've never seen anybody. But the truth of the matter is the young guy looks at his map that guy doesn't look at anymore with
detail.
the updated navionics and detail, and then gets in his boat and looks at his graph and his temperature and all this stuff, and he looks back, oh, my waypoints from last year, my trails say this, and he calculates all this into this mathematical formula like we're a mad scientist on our head, and goes, I think Myers Reef might look good right now, and drives over there. Right? It's not a spot mooching thing. It's just the young guys process the information really fast at the ramp in his 15-minute drive. And I do think, though, to your point, the 2D sonar, I can't tell you how many times I've fished an area, like pulled up on a waypoint, fished through an area, been like, man, they're just not here. And then you get down, turn your boat on, fire it up, and you get on plane and you get like 40 feet off, and then you're like, rod out the back of the boat because you've quickly found them just 50 feet in the other direction. And it all of a sudden, you know what it is? It's not that you see a fish, but sometimes you just see like a little blip on your screen, and you're like, wait a second. And you spin back around and you run over it, or like for you guys, and same with the smallmouth guys, you're running down the lake and you're doing that nice 25, 30 mile an hour run and you're seeing bottom, and then all of a sudden it just goes, and you're like, wait a second, that's not on the map, what was that? And you spin back around and you found a rock pile in the middle of nowhere that's full of walleye or perch or smallmouth, and it's just not on the map, right? So that 2D sonar, like you're saying, having it set up to run that 20 to 30 mile an hour, huge. And I do get a laugh though when I get guys in their bass boats like, I need to see bottom when I'm doing 70 miles an hour across the lake. I'm like, what are you marking? You're not marking anything, right? So like, yeah.
All right, I know Martin has something he wants to just to add to the conversation briefly.
Yeah, go ahead. Come on in.
This is more for just your guys out fishing. This is something that I learned a few years ago off of YouTube, and a lot of people don't know it, and I'm hoping that I can help you understand something. So sonar, traditional sonar like a lot of us guys use, if you're out fishing walleye or bass up north, or just fishing, and you're driving around the lake, maybe you know how to set your shaded depth, and you set your shaded depth of 20 feet and you find some humps in the lake. So you start driving up to these humps. Sonar only understands the shallowest depth, okay? This is a huge discovery that I made years ago, thinking to myself, sonars are full of crap. They aren't full of crap. You just have to understand how they work. So, unfortunately there's a pole here. But if I'm driving my boat up and the table's a hump, I go up to this hump, I'm just going slow, 2 or 3 miles an hour, and I see fish on my sonar. I'm like, oh, beautiful, beep, mark, right? Slow down my boat, reverse, boom, drop the line down. That doesn't work either. There's nothing there. No fish, but I just marked fish here. Okay, so you're going up to this hump. Those fish are sitting on the edge of this hump. They're in a place where they can keep an eye on things around them because everybody is going to get attacked by something that's bigger. So they're trying to find a place where they can kind of hide. So you come forward with your boat now, and you know, you go a little further thinking, I did see fish here, but I'm gonna go a little further. The next thing you know, you're like, boink, oh, shucks, there's a fish. That's great. But wait a minute. I had like 18 feet of line down, but my sonar only says I'm in 14 feet of water. And I'm not marking any fish, but I'm catching fish. So remember, when your sonar is coming down on the cone and it's hitting this top of the hump, those fish could be down here, maybe 10, 15 feet over, ready to feed. You're now catching them, but there's nothing on your screen because it's all showing this depth. I think this is one of the most important tips that you can understand with sonar. When you're going up to a hump, you're marking fish, keep edging forward till you start catching fish, make a second waypoint, delete the first one. That's all I got to say. That'll be a big key to you finding humps and lakes with your shaded depth, setting your waypoint at the place where you're catching fish, not worrying about what your sonar says, because it says it's only 15 feet deep. You got 20 feet of line out, but you're catching wallies or smallmouth. That's all I got to add.
Great, come on.
Mic drop.
That's it, he's not wrong, because for years, that's how we fished, and then that's when guys started trying to put side imaging transducers on their trolling motors and stuff because of that reason right there, because they would mark the hump or mark the break, but not be able to get anywhere near it or understand. A lot of walleye, especially in perch and bass, they want to be like up on that edge. They want to be comfortable and safe, and then you're like, but wait, where, what? Like I can't see him, I can't find him. So that's where side imaging came in on your trolling motor, because now when you drop your trolling motor, I can see the break on my side imaging, and now I know where I am in relation to the break, so I can cast to it. Or when you add forward-facing sonar, you now follow the break and can see the fish in relation to the break. So like the three transducers are all working in together, and I don't think there'll ever be a point where, like Martin says, 2D's not relevant. Like I think it's consistently always going to be relevant. It's just the information that you get from 2D down, side, and forward, or scout, or perspective, or 360 that processes that information, right? So, yeah, that is a very good point Martin makes about something that would drive guys bonkers that fish Lake Erie.
See with us, like right there, perfect
Yeah.
example
Yeah.
of that ledge
Undercut.
and where the fish are hanging.
Hiding under the ledge.
Not to
Yeah.
mention your transducers 15 feet the other way.
Exactly, right? So there's a great point. That reminds me of that. That's a great point that we haven't really talked about yet, is guys forget when you mark a waypoint, if you have a GPS puck, where that is in relation to your boat. Because you have to account for that when you approach that waypoint, right? So here's where there's a couple of different philosophies for guys, because guys always ask me, is my puck in the right spot? I don't know, like, it's up to you, right? Because
Where do you mark your spot from?
where do you correlate your spot? Some guys say put it over top of your transducer so that's where your spot is, because that's your transducer reading. Well, not really, because your unit itself knows where it is in relation. It's more so for me, I put them sometimes either at the very back corner of the boat or right behind the seat, because now that gives you a depth, right? So say your boat's 20 feet and it's at the back of my boat and I dropped a waypoint, I got 20 feet of offset, right, for my waypoint.
Yeah.
So that kind of gives you, I don't know how many guys have done that, dropped a waypoint and then tried to drive up to it, and it's like, wait a second, how am I not at this waypoint?
Feels like it's all.
Yeah.
Gotta remember this.
So now you got to remember, right? So some guys say, well, I'm going to put two on my boat. I'm going to put one at the back of my boat and one at the front of my boat. And then the one at my front, it doesn't work that way, right? Like you don't need two of them. What you need to do, you need three. What you need to do is put it in a spot that it's going to read one accurately, because I see guys put them under things or on an angle. It needs to get the proper signal in order to function properly, and if it's not, and sometimes you guys are turning and all of a sudden you're like, and it does like the the Windows 95 lag, and you don't understand why. But then you go back and look, and the transducer's like on an angle underneath your motor cowling like this, and you're like, I don't understand why this thing's not working. Well, it's because only a quarter of it is visible, right? You got to get that whole puck out there. And I also like to make sure that I don't interfere them with the trolling motor pucks now, because a lot of our trolling motors have GPS pucks, right? So like I just did a boat a couple weeks ago, and the guy had his NEMA puck, his GPS puck, right next to his Lowrance Ghost GPS puck. They were literally within a foot of each other at the front of the boat. And I was like, yeah, man, that's not good. Like, we're gonna put this at the back of your boat. And then I started to explain the depth to him, and he was like, so much is making sense right now why I can never find my waypoints. So